Hello everyone, and welcome back to the 10 days of JavaScript. Here we are in day number 3, and in this lesson we are going to learn about objects. So what in the world is an object? Well, let's not waste time talking, and instead let's just jump right into the action. So I want you to follow along with me. So right now, go to CodePen, and just like we did in our previous lesson, in the top right, we can click Create New Pen, or you can just keep using the same pen from the previous lesson if you still have it up. Okay, and again, in this course, we are interested in JavaScript, so I can actually just click and drag this border to hide the other two languages. And let's get started. Okay, now before I show you what an object is, let me first show you what an object is not, so that we understand what problems objects solve. Or in other words, before we learn how to use objects, let's learn why we would use objects. So first, we can sort of practice what we've learned in the last 2 lessons. So let's imagine that we want to store a bit of data about a cat. To start, we would need to store the name of the cat. So maybe I would create a variable and say let cat name equal quotes, and then I'll give it a name of Fluffy. Okay, next, let's imagine we need to store the cat's age, or how old the cat is. So maybe create a variable, let cat age. I'm just making up these variable names. You could choose any names you want, but let cat age equal, let's say the cat is 4 years old. Okay, and finally, let's say that this cat should have the ability to meow. So meowing is an action or a verb, so we know that we could maybe create a function named meow. So let's try that. Let's say function meow, parentheses, curly brackets, and inside the body of the function, or inside the curly brackets, let's just show an alert message. So alert, and in the pop-up we can say meow. Okay, now all of this code is perfectly valid. It works without any problems, and we can access the data by simply typing the name of the variable or the name of the function. Right, so for example, if we needed to access the cat's name, we can just type out cat name. We can access their age by just typing cat age, and we can call the meow function by simply saying meow, parentheses, and that will execute the function. There we see meow. However, even though this code technically works, it is not ideal from a staying organized perspective. Because you and I know that these variables and functions are related, right? They all have to do with a cat, but as far as the computer or browser is concerned, these variables and functions have absolutely nothing to do with each other. And this is not ideal for many reasons, but probably the biggest reason is if we were going to collaborate and work with another person on this code, they would not immediately know that these functions and variables are related. They would need to read all of the names and see, cat name, cat age, meow, and they would have to sit there and think and use their own deductive reasoning and decide, yes, these are all cat related. So the question becomes, how can we write our code in a way so that it's painfully obvious that there's a relationship between the name of the cat, the age of the cat, and the ability to meow? Well, the answer is objects. So let's delete everything that we've got here, and let me show you how I would code or write that same data, but using an object instead. So we're starting fresh. Type this out with me. Let cat equal, and now in this context, since this has nothing to do with a function, in this context, curly brackets are how we can create an object. So inside these pair of curly brackets, we can include multiple pieces of data. So I want you to think of an object as a container, and we can store whatever we want inside it. So the first property that I want to store inside this new empty object is the cat's name. So let's say name, colon, and then quotes, Fluffy. And then let's create another property that stores the cat's age. So after the quotes for Fluffy, let's say comma, and then on a new line, I can say age, colon, 4. Now I know the syntax here is a bit weird or unfamiliar, so let's review what's going on. Because I know that in a previous lesson, we learned that you can store a bit of data or create a variable by saying let my name equal Brad. And this syntax that we learned that uses let and the equal sign, this is correct. However, inside an object, we need to do things a bit differently. So for example, outside the context of an object, down here, this is how we create a variable, right? You choose a name and then you use the equal symbol and then you store whatever data you're wanting to store. Within an object, instead of a variable, we call it a property. So inside the curly brackets, what do we want to store in this object? We just include the name of whatever property we want, so name or age or eye color or fur color. And then after that name for the property, instead of an equal sign, we include a colon. Then we include whatever data we want to store. And then this is important, when you want to include another property, we need to separate them with a comma. Okay, so just like down here where we created a variable that is a simple string of text, well, up here we are creating a variable named cat, but instead of a simple string of text or a number, it is an object. It is of the object data type. This object can store as many properties as we want. So we've got name, Fluffy, age, 4. We could add another one, say comma, eye color, colon, blue. Cool. So one of the advantages of using an object is that it is now immediately clear that these properties are related to one another. The idea is that anything that has to do with this cat lives within this object. This way, instead of having a bunch of different variables floating around with different names, we just have this one cat object or this one cat variable that is self-contained. It's independent. It stores everything it needs. Now you might be wondering, how can we access or use these properties? It's super easy, so check this out. Down here, if I wanted to access the cat's name, you just type cat.name, right? So we start with the name of the variable, cat, and then we just use the dot or the period to look inside an object. So cat.name would evaluate to Fluffy. We could say cat.age, that would evaluate to 4. Obviously cat.eyecolor would return blue. You get the idea. However, you might be wondering, what happened to the cat's ability to meow? Remember before we had a function named meow. Well, check this out. Instead of just simple properties that contain a string of text or a number, an object can also contain functions inside it. So after eye color blue, let's say comma, and then let's say meow parentheses, right? That's how you create a function. Then after the parentheses, we have curly brackets. So inside the body of this function, let's create an alert message that says meow. Okay, and then down here at the very bottom, outside our object, let's try to run or call the meow function. So we start with cat, right? That's the overall container or object. And then we look inside it with a dot, and then we can just call meow. So the name of the function, and then parentheses. There we see our alert, meow. Perfect. So in our previous lesson, we learned about functions, right? This is how you execute or run or call a function. You type out its name and then parentheses. And what we're doing here is no different. We're just looking inside our object, right, with the period, cat.meow. However, even though technically this is a function, meow, when a function lives inside an object or belongs to an object, we refer to it as a method. So the idea is that an object contains properties and methods. Cool. So I think you're starting to see why an object is so useful. You can create this one single entity that contains all of the data and all of the abilities or functions or methods that that object needs, right? It's organized, it's self-contained. Everything that has to do with the cat lives within these overall curly brackets. And then whenever you want to use it or access it, you just type out the name of the object and look inside it with a dot or a period. And this is cool because it allows us to mirror our data after the way things work in real life, right? So in the real world, I'm a human being, I'm an object, and I'm a self-contained entity, right? I contain all of my properties and all of my abilities. So Brad.eyecolor, right? Or Brad.age, Brad.height, right? All of the information about me. And then I also have abilities like Brad.walk, right? The name of the method or function, parentheses, Brad.walk, Brad.run, Brad.jump. Cool. Now, before we move on, I just want to clarify that outside the context of an object, when you create a function, you do want to use the keyword function, like function jump, like this. This is what we practiced in our previous lesson. However, within the context of an object, we do not need to include the keyword function. So just like we have the names of our properties, name, age, eye color, we just include another comma and then the name of the function, parentheses, curly brackets. And again, remember, when a function lives inside an object like this, we refer to it as a method. So this is the meow method. Another quick note, I don't want you to be confused by the curly brackets. So in programming, the same character can mean something different in a different context. So on the first line of code, this curly bracket here is signifying the opening or beginning of our object, right? And then down on the very last line, this is closing our object. But then with our meow method, in this context, the curly brackets represent the body of this function or the body of this method. Hopefully that's not too confusing, but even if it is, don't worry because we are going to practice this again and again, and you don't need to remember it perfectly right here, right now. Now I do have some good news. In just a minute or two from now, we are going to do something practical. We are going to leverage the web browser's built-in objects to make something happen when the visitor clicks somewhere on our web page, right down here on the preview section. However, before we get to that, I do want to show you one more theoretical aspect of objects. And that is that within an object, you can nest another object. So follow along with me. For example, maybe after this age property, so age and then we've got 4 and then the comma, let's create another new property named foods, so foods colon, and then instead of including a simple string of text or a number, let's include another object. So curly brackets to create an object. Let's include a comma afterwards. Okay, but then within these curly brackets for this new object, why don't we drop down and we could create 2 new properties, maybe named favorite, right? Their favorite food. Let's say tuna, and then comma, create another property, maybe least favorite, colon, maybe oranges. So the idea here is that within our overall object, we have these properties, right? So name is a string of text, age is a number, and now in this case, the foods property is an object itself. So this curly bracket starts the object, this curly bracket closes the object, and then it can have its own properties like favorite and least favorite. So now outside of the object, if we wanted to access the cat's favorite or least favorite foods, we would just type cat.foods.favorite. The key idea here is that we can use multiple dots within a line of code like this to just keep looking one level deeper inside the objects. So we start with the cat object, we drill inside that and find the foods object, and then we can drill inside that to find the value of favorite or the least favorite properties. So you're not limited, you can nest your data as many layers deep as you need to go. Okay, now having said all of that, let's move on to the practical or fun part of this lesson, and let's set things up so that anytime a visitor clicks on this preview part of the web page, right, this is a preview of what our code is building, let's set it up so that any click opens up an alert message that says, hello there. So how would we do that? Well, our JavaScript environment, in this case the web browser, it brings to the table a bunch of its own pre-built objects. So just like how you and I created the cat object that stored the data and abilities of the cat, the web browser has pre-built objects that store the data and abilities of the web page. And of these different objects, perhaps one of the most useful is the browser's document object. We will learn more about the document object later on in the course, but for now, all you need to know is that it sort of represents the web page as a whole, meaning it's an object that contains all sorts of properties and methods. In this case, if we want to show an alert message anytime someone clicks down here on the page, then technically speaking, that means we want to be on the lookout for the click event. So let's look inside the browser's document object, so document dot, and the document object contains a method named add event listener. Okay, so we are running or calling this method, add event listener, and within the parentheses, we need to pass it 2 arguments. So just as a placeholder, I would say a comma b. So the first argument, instead of a, we want to pass it which event we are listening for. So for example, you could say click, or what are some other web page events? You could try scroll or key down when someone pushes a key on their keyboard. But we're going to go with click. Okay, but the idea is that the browser has different event keywords that you can listen for. We're listening for the click event. And then the second argument that we want to pass into this function, or I should say this method, is a function that we want to run every time this event happens. So maybe right below this code, why don't we create our own brand new function, so function, and we can give it any name we want. I will name mine my amazing function, parentheses, curly brackets, and inside the body of the function, why don't we just create an alert that says, hello there. Okay, so we've created this function definition. This is the name of the function. Now up on this line of code, when we are calling the web browser's add event listener method, for the second argument, instead of the b placeholder, I'm just going to say my amazing function. And notice, and this is really important, that I did not include a new pair of parentheses right after the function name here to actually call the function, because we don't want to run or call or execute this function right here, right now. Instead, we are just passing along the name. We are just passing a reference to the function, and it's up to the web browser's add event listener method to know when to call this function, right? In this case, it's going to call the function anytime we click anywhere on the page. So if I shrink this so we can actually see the preview area down here, and if I click anywhere on the preview page, we see that our function successfully runs. And if I close the alert and click on the preview page again, perfect. We can see that the add event listener method is doing its job. So the idea is that we can leverage the web browser's built-in objects in order to make the web page do whatever we want at just the right moment. Now, if everything in this lesson was not crystal clear, that's okay. I do not expect you to remember exactly how we created our cat object from scratch. We will practice that again later in the course. Right now, all you need to know about objects is that you can look inside of them with the dot. If that's at all familiar to you, if it makes even a little bit of sense, you're right on track. Now, in our very next lesson, we are going to learn about arrays. So what in the world is an array? Let's keep our momentum rolling, let's answer that question, and I will see you in the next lesson. The 10 Days of JavaScript is the first chapter for my upcoming premium course, Full Stack JavaScript from Scratch. I'm making these first 10 or 11 videos freely available on YouTube. And so for the next 10 days, I'm going to upload one new video each day. So stay tuned, or if you're watching this in the future, all the lessons are up, so feel free to binge watch. The full premium course is not available just yet, but if you subscribe to this channel, you'll be notified as soon as it's out. Or if you're watching this video in the future, it's already available. Enjoy!